most options for voting, early voting in the nation. And Secretary of State Husted says, you know, you should be able to vote. He points out that in 2004, more Ohioans voted than in 2012, when all these voting options were available. What is your take on that? I mean, you know...
Who says that Ohio has the most options? Who quantifies that?
Secretary of State. He's telling
Well,
us
I think he's got a motive to say something like that. The fact of the matter is, a federal judge examined Ohio law and came back with two crucial findings. One is he violated the Constitution and he violated the Voting Rights Act. So, quite frankly, any assessment that he has on that particular issue has to be questioned because a federal judge found that he runs his operation in an unconstitutional manner. Senator Turner, I know you have something to say.
And thanks, Senator. And just to add to that, you know, Ohio should be the gold standard. I think voters deserve better than what they're getting now, and let us not forget how we got here in the first place as a state is because of what happened in 2004, where people were in long lines for hours and predominantly in urban areas where the population is. 6 and 8 hours just to go vote. Voting shouldn't take all day, and we do know that several hundred, or at least 170,000, up to 170,000 people, depending on which study you read, walked away and said that they couldn't stand in line to vote anymore. But Ohio corrected that. The legislature, in a bipartisan way, corrected that. They didn't hand the voters of the state of Ohio those opportunities of 35 days and golden week out of the goodness of their heart. Voters got that because of the chaos and the disruption of what happened in the great state of Ohio in 2004. So the question becomes, why are we going backwards? What is wrong with the progress that we have made in the state of Ohio? And to put a finer point on that, the whole notion that Ohio should be compared to other states, we should be the gold standard. But that's just like somebody saying that I robbed your house and I took everything out of your house, but you still have your roof. So why are you complaining? It is a faulty premise, it is wrong, and Ohio voters deserve what they have right now, and Senator Kearney is absolutely right. The judge has spoken based on the merits of their case and what is going on in Ohio, not in some other state. They deserve this.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just in terms of the mechanics of the proposal, can you tell me some key differences between what you've already proposed in this and then you know, the 30 hours on the weekdays? Is this something that a board could say, you know what, we're going to have voting hours Monday through Thursday and meet that 30 minimum and not Friday?
There's a floor. You know, they can't go below the floor, but they can, in a bipartisan way, talk about what the mix looks like for their voters. In terms of this being similar, absolutely, this was pulled out of the Voter Protection Act that I introduced that has not had one single has not had one single hearing.
Senator, you talk about uniformity not equaling equality, but
Equity.
Equity. Could there be an argument, though, by Benton County and some of these other rural counties that 8 hours of voting on a Sunday and 12 hours on a Saturday is just overkill and it's just going to use up money and resources that isn't really going to benefit too many people?
They could argue that, but again, we should err on the side of the voter. I'm sure people could argue that in 2004, but we saw what happened. Again, this is very much pro-voter centered. There is a cost to live in a representative democracy, and I really think these types of investments, notwithstanding the concerns of all of our different boards of elections, is worth it, which is why we have default hours for voters, and we have flexibilities for local county boards of elections.
I just wanted to follow up with that and saying that I think the flexibility is key in allowing those boards of elections in the more rural areas to adjust and to accommodate their needs in that particular county, representing a rural region of the state. I think about this in the terms of a worker, a nurse perhaps, in say a county like Belmont County, where she may have to drive 25 minutes, work 12-hour shifts, where weekend voting is critical for that individual. Perhaps it's a single mom trying to run a household and hold down a job. So I think the legislation fits with rural counties and giving them the flexibility they need to create hours that work for the voters in those counties.
So to be clear, this doesn't set a uniform statewide schedule where every county will be open from 8 to 6, but rather statewide minimum standards at each county.
There are default, I mean, the major takeaway from this is that there are default hours that every voter, no matter where they live in the state of Ohio, can expect to be able to go and vote. The flexibility is in that the boards of elections themselves can get together and talk about ways in which they want to further enfranchise their voters. But again, making sure that every voter has that opportunity to exercise their right to vote should be our major concern. And to the point about, you know, the funding, some of the funding, I mean, as a nation, we should look at investing more money in voting infrastructure, period. That is a conversation that we should have as a nation. And to again ask the question about what it means to live in a representative democracy and making sure that we promote voting for everybody. We should not be happy with how voter participation is happening, and we should continue to push to increase that participation. But you certainly don't increase voter participation by stripping away options to go to the ballot box. That doesn't increase voter participation at all.
But just to follow up on her questions, this doesn't set the times, right? That's the flexibility the boards would have. In terms of, they have a minimum hour that they've got to meet, but the times they can set.
The times on the Saturdays and Sundays, they have to do that.
Okay, and if they don't reach that bipartisan agreement,
Then those default, and as you notice, and thank you for that question, if you notice on the default hours, which I should have, the default hours, there's been more hours
right.
than absolutely. So that really hopefully encourages them to come to some bipartisan agreement. But the default hours, that would happen if there is disagreement. As you may recall in 2012, when the current Secretary of State voted across the state, we noticed that in more urban areas where the split was, you know, it was Republican, Democrats were voting for more hours, the Secretary of State broke the tie, which then caused less voting opportunities in those urban areas. You will notice that Democratic boards of election members in more redder counties, they agreed to increase those opportunities. This is before the uniformity directive was put out. What these default hours says is that either you come to an agreement or voters, if you can't agree, then the voters win. So it is a win-win proposition for the voters of the great state of Ohio. You know, and quite frankly, we shouldn't even be arguing about this in the 21st century. As Senator Gentile laid out, we have so many challenges in this state, putting people back to work, educating our children, and making sure people have bright futures. And in the 21st century, 94 years from women getting the right to vote, here we are arguing over the same battles that were fought by various groups in this country at various times to be able to articulate their vision through the power of the ballot box. This is wrong, what is happening, and I'm certainly glad, although it is unfortunate, but really, really glad that the courts have sided with the voters. And again, what the judge has done is great for voters.